In this video, we're going to create the crafting system from Minecraft. We're going to have our 3x3 grid, position the items according to a recipe, and get our output that we can use. Let's begin! Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey, and this channel is all about helping you learn how to make your own games with in-depth tutorials made by a professional indie game developer. So if you find the video helpful, consider subscribing. Okay, so here's what we want to create. We have the UI set up in here, just like in Minecraft. So we have a simple 3x3 grid, as well as an output slot. Then down here is the current inventory, where I have a bunch of items. This is using the inventory that we made in a previous video. Then I can drag and drop items, which again was also covered in another video. And using this, I can place items into the crafting window. Now the crafting works based on recipes. Those recipes are based on specific items being placed in specific positions in the crafting grid. So for example, I place the wood right down the middle. Now just like this, there's nothing on the output since this is not a valid recipe. However, now I can place this wood on the position right beneath it, and there you go, now we have a valid recipe to output a stick. So this is the recipe that we defined in order to make a stick. We have two pieces of wood, one there and one in there. Now when I grab the stick and drop it in my inventory, there you go, the pieces of wood were consumed, so the entire recipe has its cost. And now another recipe is putting two pieces of wood one on top of the other with a stick underneath it, and there you go, we have a wooden sword. And if I now make another stick and then take these two out, place the stick in there and the two diamonds on top, and there you go, now we have a diamond sword. So here we have our fully functioning crafting system. And now here on the side, we also have the player equipment window. This was also made in a previous video. So right now my character is only attacking using punches and kicks. However, now I can drag and equip the wooden sword, and there you go, now he's using a wooden sword. And I can take it out, replace it with the diamond sword that we crafted, and there you go, now we have this nice sword. So over here you can see a whole nice ecosystem built from a bunch of separate systems. So we have our inventory, then we drag and drop items to place them into the crafting system. The crafting system receives items and according to a recipe makes something, and then we can take our crafted items and equip them into our character. Everything is written in a clear way so that it is very easy to add more recipes and more items. This video is made possible thanks to these awesome supporters. Go to patreon.com/unitycodemonkey to get some perks and help keep the videos free for everyone. Alright, so this is our goal. Let's get to it. Okay, so here's our starting scene. I have my player character that I can move around and I can attack. Over here's the inventory and the equip UI. Right now, there's nothing we can equip, so let's craft some items. Let's begin by making our crafting system script. So we make a new script and call it our crafting system. Now in here, let's get rid of mono behavior since we're not going to be using these functions. Instead, let's make a simple constructor, so a crafting system, okay. And now let's see how we're going to represent our grid. For example, we could use the grid system we created previously. If I was making this system to use in one of my games, that's exactly what I would do. However, in order to keep this video simple, let's make a simple basic array instead. So up here we make an array. So we're going to have a private, it's going to be of type item, so an item array, and call it our item array. The item class is in here. This is the class that we created when we made the inventory system, so make sure you watch that video. So here we have our item array, however it's going to be a multi-dimensional array. And now on the constructor we're going to initialize it. And for the size, let's define a constant. So we have our grid size and we initialize our array. Alright, so here we have our 3x3 crafting grid. Now let's make some helper functions to help work with this grid. Alright, so here we have a bunch of functions to interact with our crafting system grid. So we can ask if a certain position is empty. We can get the item in that position, set an item in that position, increase the item amount, decrease it, remove an item, and try to add an item. So we first test if it's empty, then we set the item. If it's not empty, then we test if it's the same type. If so, we increase the item amount, and if not, then we cannot add it. So we should have pretty much all the actions we're going to need to implement with our crafting system. Now let's test this out. So let's go back into the editor. Here we already have a testing game object with a testing script. This is where we're making the connection between the player and the UI inventory and the character equipment and the UI character equipment. Now here let's construct a crafting system. Then let's create a new item. So we have a new item, and then we go into the crafting system and let's set the item. And finally we do a debug.log on the get item on this position. And now let's test, and we should be able to see this diamond located on the item on the 00 position. Here we are, and yep, the console does say we have a diamond placed on the 00 position. Awesome. So we have set up the basic logic for our crafting system. Now let's make our UI visual. So here in the canvas, let's build it. So we make our game object, call it our UI crafting system. Alright, so here we have our crafting system UI. We just have a simple background, then we have a output slot here on the right, and our 3x3 grid of input slots. As you can see, they are all named 00, 1020, and so on. And then on top we have an item container. In this item container is where we're going to instantiate the items that are placed on the grid. Okay, so now let's handle the code. Let's make a new script for our UI crafting system. And we drag it in there. Okay. Now in here, let's make a grid and locate all of our grid positions. Alright, so here we have our references for all of the various slots as well as the output slot. Now let's make a function to be able to spawn an item on a grid position. So here we're going to instantiate that prefab, so let's add a field for that reference. And back in the editor we drag it, okay. Alright, so we have a function to create an item. We instantiate our prefab. We locate it right on top of the slot transform position. And we simply call the function to set the item. Okay, so just like this, we can now create an item on any position in our grid. And now let's also make one to create an item on the output. And just like that, okay. So now let's test it out. Let's go up here and let's create some items. Alright, so we should be able to see a diamond, a piece of wood, and a sword made of wood. Let's see. And yep, there we have our items correctly placed in our grid. So we got a diamond there, wood in there, and a sword in there. Alright, awesome. And again, since we're using the prefab that we made previously, we can simply grab and drag and drop these items. Alright, so far so good. Now let's handle being able to take an item and drop it onto the crafting window. So first let's make a script to add to our slots that will handle the item drop. So here we make a new C# script, call our UI crafting item slot. And let's drag the script onto every single one of our slots. So crafting item slot, yep. Right, now in here we're going to do just like we did on the equip inventory video. So check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Essentially we're going to capture the iDrop handler event. So inside Unity engine.event systems. So here is the script that we made in the character equipment slot. Now we could probably make this more generic and use it for both scenarios, but in this case, let's just copy paste the same code. So we're going to have the same behavior. Alright, so on drop, we're simply going to fire off an event. Okay, there it is, very simple. Now let's go back into the main UI script. And now in here, we need to know on which grid position we dropped an item. So in here, for example, we could subscribe individually to every single item slot. However, that would result in a ton of duplication code. So instead, let's use a single event, but we're going to pass in the X and Y into our slot. So first, let's go into our slot script, and in here, let's receive the X and the Y. Okay, we have this function to test them. And now over here on our item drop event args, let's add some more. So let's add an int for the X and an int for the Y. Okay, so we now have this event being fired, and it also tells us the X and Y. And now we can go back into our crafting system. And in here we can go into our slot transform array. We get the component of type UI crafting slot. And in there we subscribe to the on item dropped event. Alright, so anytime we drop something into any slot, it will fire off this event. And over here we have the item dropped event args. So this contains the X and the Y. And here, just for testing, let's do a simple debug.log. And we also need to call the setXY function. So in here. Alright, so we call setXY, we subscribe to the event, then on the event we do a debug.log which shows the item, the X and Y. Alright, let's test. Okay, here we are, let's pick up this diamond and drop it in there. And yep, there you go, it says we dropped an item on position 20, which is indeed that one. Now drop a piece of wood in there, and there you go, wood 22. Alright, so we have everything working correctly. Awesome. Now that we have the visuals working, let's interact with the crafting system. So over here on our UI script, let's have a function to receive our crafting system. Alright, we just set it like this, and now we can go back into our testing script. And here we can make our connections. So we first make the crafting system. Now let's make a serialized field for our UI crafting system. And we call set and we pass in our crafting system. Alright, so now we have the UI being aware of the crafting system. And now over here, when we capture a dropped, let's tell the crafting system to try to add that item into that position. So we can use the function that we made previously, try add item, and we pass in the e.item into this X and Y. Alright, so just like this, it should be working. Try to add an item into our crafting system on a specific position. However, if we do it just like this, then we won't actually see anything. So we need to update our visual. Let's make that function. In order to update, first let's destroy everything in our item container, which is where we're spawning our items. Alright, so first we clear off all the old items, then we cycle through our entire grid. We ask the crafting system if it's not empty. If not, then we create an item on that X, that Y, and we pass in the item that is currently in there. Alright, so this function should be working for updating our visual. Let's call it when we set the crafting system. And now we also want to call it whenever something changes, so we need to be notified of that. So let's go into our crafting system. And here, when something changes, let's fire off an event. Alright, so here we have our event called onGridChanged, and we invoke it when we set the item or modify the amount. And now we can go back into our UI, and in here when we receive it, let's also subscribe to the onGridChanged event, and when that happens, then we update our visual. Okay, so all of this should be working. Let's remove these items for testing and see if it's empty. Okay, here we are, and yep, our crafting window is empty. Now let's drag the wood, drop it in there, and there you go, I placed the wood in that position. Drag the diamond, place it in there, and there you go, just like that. So now we can drag and drop items into correct positions on our grid. Awesome. Alright, so now that we have the crafting system working so that we can drop things in various positions on the grid, now it's finally time to handle making our recipes. Now there are many ways we can define our recipes. We can make it visual or code-based or even have an external tool. Here, let's go with the simplest way, and then you can expand upon it to fit your own needs. Here on our crafting system, let's define our recipe. Alright, so here we have our stick recipe. We essentially create a grid of the same grid size, and then we simply place the item types required. So as you can see, it's none on most of them, except right here down the middle, we have 2 pieces of wood. All right, now let's make a function to try to get a recipe output. So we cycle through all of our recipe positions and see if they match with what's currently on the grid. Alright, so we cycle through our entire grid. We compare it against our recipe. If the recipe should have an item in this position, then we test. If it's empty or the item in there is different from the one that should be there, then this is an invalid recipe, so we return none. And if we go through and all of them are valid, then we return our stick recipe. Alright, so here's how we're getting our recipes. And now in our crafting system, let's also make a field for the current output. Alright, so then we have a function to create an output. So we test against the recipe. If the recipe has no output, then the output is null. If not, then we create a new item for our output. Alright, so whenever we change something in our recipe, let's try to create that. So over here, when you have the set item, we do all of this and we try to create our output. So now in order to have the UI update, let's make a function to get the current output. And now we can go back into the UI. And here, when we update our visual, let's also ask if the crafting system, if the get output item is not null, then we can create our item output. Alright, so just like this, everything should be working, and let's test. Okay, so here we are, and our crafting system starts off empty, okay. Now let's pick up this piece of wood and drop it right down the middle, and yep, there you go, the wood is there, but there's still no output. So the recipe has 2 pieces of wood, one above the other. So now let's drag this one, drop it in there, and there you go, there's our output successfully created. Alright, awesome. So over here, our recipe is working correctly. So now we can take this stick and drop it over here into our inventory. And yep, there it is. However, you can already see an issue. We crafted this stick, but essentially didn't have any cost. So here we still have 5 and 5. So something was crafted, but nothing was consumed. Let's solve that. So here in our crafting system, let's make a function to consume our recipe items. And here what we're going to do is cycle through our entire grid. And we're going to remove an amount from each of them. Alright, that should do it. So now we need to call this function. And now the way that the items work in order to work with various containers is each container has a iTimeHolder interface. Here it implements a remove item, add item, and can add item. So when an item goes from the inventory into the crafting system or the character equipment, it gets removed from the item holder that was holding it. So here that is being implemented in the crafting system. And it's over here that we know that we removed the output item. When that happens, we create a new output. And when we do, then let's consume our recipe items. Okay, so let's test. Okay, so here we are, and we have our wood. So let's go and drop it in there, and there you go, still no recipe. Now drop it in there, and there you go, valid recipe, we have our stick. And if I move it away, there you go, invalid recipe, no stick. All right, so put it in there. There we have our stick. Now let's pick it up and drop it in the inventory. And there you go, we have a stick in our inventory, and the items were consumed. So we have our stick and just 4 pieces of wood. Now drag another one. There you go, another stick. Now we just got 3, just have 2. Just have 1, now drop it, and there you go, we built 5 sticks, and we no longer have any wood. So we consumed all of it, and we no longer have a valid recipe. Awesome! Okay, so just like this, we have our crafting system pretty much complete. Let's just set it up to handle multiple recipes. So in our crafting system, instead of having just 1 stick recipe, let's have a dictionary of recipes. Okay, so we have a dictionary with a key of item type, and a value of item type array. Okay, so we instantiate our dictionary, then we create our recipe just like we did, and we set it on the dictionary on the key stick. Alright, that should work. Now down here, on to get our recipe output, essentially we're going to cycle through all of our recipes. Alright, so we're cycling through all of our keys in our dictionary. Then we do the same validation as previously. We have a boolean. We start off with true on the complete recipe. If we find something that is different, then it is not a complete recipe. So as we reach down here, if it is complete, we return this item type. If not, then we go into the next dictionary recipe. And if we go through all of them and we don't have any return, then we return none. Alright, so this should be working all exactly the same, except working with a dictionary. Let's just test it out to make sure it still works. Okay, here we are. Let's drag one in there and one in there. And there you go. We got the stick. Move it to the side and no stick. Okay, so far so good. So now just need to add all of the other recipes. Alright, so here are the new recipes defined. So for the wooden sword, we have a stick down the middle, then 2 wood above it, and still none on all the other sides. And for the diamond, we have a stick and 2 diamonds. Okay, now let's try them out. Okay, so first of all we have are wood and diamonds. So now first, we're going to need a stick. So let's drag the wood in there and wood in there. There you go, we have our stick. So take out the stick. Now to make the wooden sword, let's put 2 wood above and now a stick below it. And there you go, we have our wooden sword. So let's drag it and pick it up. And there you go, we have our wooden sword. Now for the diamond, first we need a stick. So let's put and pick up another stick. Now take out the wood and replace it with 2 diamonds with a stick beneath them. And yep, there you go, we have our diamond sword. Alright, so there it is, just like this, everything is working correctly. Okay, so here's the character equipment system that was made in a previous video. So again, let's create our items. Alright, here we have the wooden sword and the diamond sword. And right now the character doesn't have any sword equipped, so we're only attacking with punches and kicks. And now let's equip the wooden sword. And there you go, now he's using the wooden sword. And now let's equip the diamond sword, and there you go, we have the diamond sword. Alright, so here we have our fully functioning crafting system. So we start off with some very basic resources. Then we build some complex items using the crafting window. And then we combine those items with a character equipment in order to equip them. So again, here it is, the whole thing working. And as you saw, the code is very simple, so you can easily expand this to fit whatever recipes and items you want. This video is made possible thanks to these awesome supporters. Go to patreon.com/unitycodemonkey to get some perks and help keep the videos free for everyone. As always, you can download the project files and utilities from unitycodemonkey.com. Subscribe to the channel for more Unity tutorials, post any questions you have in the comments, and I'll see you next time.